Fukushima is still a huge worldwide problem. Japan is saying now that the only option is to dump Fukushima's radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. They have no more places to store this water, so they say. This is on Science Alert by Aria Bentix, Business Insider. March 11, 2011, we know that Japan was struck by the most powerful earthquake in the nation's history. It was a magnitude 9 that triggered a tsunami with waves up to 133 feet, that's 40 meters in height. The disaster then set off 3 nuclear meltdowns and 3 hydrogen explosions at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. 8 years later, that is now, Fukushima holds more than 1 million tons of contaminated water, and that's still going to be growing, obviously. The water comes from 2 main sources. The first is the tsunami caused the reactor cores to overheat and melt, so cleanup workers injected water into the core to cool them, and in the wake of the accident, groundwater also seeped in beneath the reactors, mixing with radioactive material. To store this contaminated water, the plant currently has 1,000 sealed tanks, but the water is still accumulating. There's enough room to keep the liquid contained through the summer of 2022, but after that, there will be no space left, so they say. Perhaps they don't want to fill up the whole of Japan with this water, who knows? Now, at news briefings in Tokyo, Japan's Environment Minister Hoshiaki Harada said that coming 2022, quote, the only option will be to drain it into the sea and dilute the contaminated water. Well, you know what that means. That means that the whole of the Pacific Ocean is going to be contaminated. You understand what that means for the fishing industry. You understand what that means for people who consume that fish. Now, the Japanese government, however, is waiting on a verdict from a panel of experts before making a final decision about what to do with this contaminated water. The environmental group Greenpeace, in the meantime, said in its statement that the only environmental acceptable option would be to continue to store the water and filter it for contaminants. But that would require more tanks and an expensive filtration process. Dumping the water could reduce cleanup costs, they say. Okay, to them it'll be less cost, but they're passing that problem onto the whole world. Now, only 2 events have ever been designated level 7 nuclear accidents by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. That's Fukushima and Chernobyl. The majority of the radiation released during the Fukushima disaster wound up in the Pacific Ocean, but the meltdown also forced the evacuation of more than 200,000 people from that area, about 43,000 of whom still have not returned. The Japanese Center for Economic Research estimated that the cleanup costs for the disaster could cost about $660 billion. Well, look, that's their problem. They've got to do something. They can't pass this on to the environment, obviously. Now, the Japanese Center for Economic Research estimates $660 billion. Shortly after this tsunami, Fukushima plant workers constructed storage tanks to house the contaminated water. They used cool and reactor cores, but that's what they used to cool the reactor cores, the water, obviously. But they also had to contend with the radioactive groundwater, since cracks in the downed reactor's foundations allowed the liquid to seep in from below. This left cleanup crews with more dirty water, radioactive water that is, to store and treat than they anticipated. Now, to purify all this water, plant workers at first used zeolites, a volcanic material that cling to the radioactive isotope called cesium. Then in 2013, they filtered the water for strontium, another toxic radioactive substance, but they had trouble filtering out an isotope called tritium since it binds easily to water. In 2016, the Ministry of Japan concluded that none of the available methods for removing tritium would work for Fukushima. Greenpeace later said the government had been deterred by the price tag. So it all comes down to cost, you see. So don't you get the feeling that it's not really that they don't have the space, it's just that they don't have the money, or they don't want to spend the money to keep doing this? It's already cost them $660 billion, and they don't want to pay out any more, obviously. So, Greenpeace said the government has been deterring the price tag of all the viable methods. One system from a company called Kurion would have cost another $1 billion to set up, plus several $100 million to operate every single year. And which means that effectively the Pacific Ocean is going to become Fukushima's garbage dump. Water contaminating tritium is not very dangerous for humans. Dumping tritium-laced water into the ocean is commonplace for coastal nuclear plants, but it could endanger the local marine species, including the fish, which provide the source of income for people living near these power plants. In 2018, Fukushima's operator, the Tokyo Electric Power Company TEPCO, revealed that isotopes like strontium lingered in the water, which meant that about 80% of the plant's treated water still had radiation levels above the government standard for ocean dumping. So that means that this should not be dumped in the water, obviously. Some tanks had radiation levels that were 20,000 times greater than the government safety standards. Sending that contaminated water into the ocean, of course, could allow it to travel to nearby shores in South Korea, where it could contaminate that local seafood supply. Now, Greenpeace expert told Business Insider, this is Jan Hackervamp, he said the sea is not a garbage dump. The sea is a common home for all people and creatures and must be protected. So, I think the international community has to get together and do something to help clean up Fukushima. Obviously, I don't know who's paying for this. I doubt that it's TEPCO. I thought TEPCO had gone bankrupt by now, but anyway, perhaps it's the Japanese government that's paying for all this, but still, this is not a solution. You can't dump it into the Pacific Ocean. Besides the fact that all this goes into not only the Asian market, but it also goes to the west coast of the United States. It goes all the way down to Australia. It goes everywhere where this water circulates. I'll leave this below for you for this on Science Alert. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.